games do not look like they did when I was a kid. I'm over 30 now, which means I've been playing games for over 20 years, and boy, have they come a long way. Maybe too far. Hear me out.
The new Super Nintendo system is out. For those of you who follow the Super Mario series,
Gameboy turns 25 years old today.
Hardware from the late 90s and early 2000s was way less powerful than the hardware we have now. Those limitations largely dictated the visuals that developers could paint on screen, forcing them to get creative with their designs. And I'm gonna show you this is a lot harder than it looks. Think about your Super Nintendos, N64s, Game Boys, right? Especially those handhelds. The original Game Boy had a 160 by 144 resolution screen. That's 100 times less than today's standard 1080p display. So with that screen, you really can't help but render art in a pixelated manner. And thank God, because with or without low resolution, these devices simply lacked the raw power to render anything resembling real-time 3D graphics. There was no choice but to instead opt for extremely efficient pixelated scenes and characters. But why did these retro games feel so effortlessly fun and video gamey in the best way possible? I'd venture it goes a little bit beyond nostalgia, and I actually think it has a lot to do with the visuals from this era of gaming. Because of their limited capabilities, the graphics we got were in no way realistic. They were extremely stylized. Artists had to rely on players to fill in the visual gaps. That's the beauty of a stylized art form. It may be an imitation of real life, but its goal is not to duplicate it. We're forced to think just a little bit about what we're seeing before we decide what it is or how we feel about it. And I, for one, really like this mindset that I find myself in when playing these retro sort of games. Luckily, I think a lot of people agree because we still have a ton of games coming out that maintain this retro look. And some real slappers, too. I recently had the pleasure of playing Celeste. This game is awesome. Cannot recommend it more. The characters, the story, the gameplay, the challenge, but the art, man, I can't get over how amazing this game looked. Look at Madeline. Madeline? I don't know. If you're lazy, maybe she looks like a bunch of blocks, but consider what you see after half a second longer. Maybe zoom out a little bit. Put her in some context, and boom, we're now transported to this really charming snowy mountain. Look at this scene. Don't you just want to move this little character? You can't help but want to make her run around and jump, right? I feel that too. And this is what I mean by the video gaminess of these retro style pixel art sort of games, right? There's something about this aesthetic that makes me want to sit down and play the game. Not necessarily like read about it or watch someone else play it or critique it or whatever, but actually sit down and play it. Maybe because it's not trying to be so much more than a game. It's not trying to be a cinematic masterpiece or win most impressive graphics of the year. It's just trying to be a humble video game, unapologetically. It's refreshing, and I think it lowers the barrier to entry, in my mind at least, of committing to interacting with this medium. And so then I got to thinking, it might also lower the barrier to entry of somebody like me creating video game art, right? Like if you look at it, it's just a few pixels on the screen. Maybe I could do. How hard could that really be? Fuck it. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna try it. And you know what? It's not that simple. I perused around the web, watching a few YouTube videos, and then I pretty much just jumped right in. I was gonna redesign the gg.octopus logo as pixel art. Super easy, small scope, right? There are a few tools of the trade when it comes to pixel art. You can configure Photoshop or mess around on some web-based apps, but hands down the most popular and widely recommended pixel art editor is called Aseprite. I confidently shelled out 20 smackers for this guy and got to work. I really liked the editor experience. It actually felt somewhat akin to a Photoshop, which I have a decent amount of experience in, so a lot of the keyboard shortcuts felt second nature to me. Off to a good start, I would say. Alright, so let's start plopping some pixels down.
So basically,
It's like a ball with like curling lines coming out. It does not seem that complicated. I don't think this would be that difficult. Now, the first thing about pixel art, at least at the scale I was dealing with, is it's immediately clear how few pixels you have to get an idea across. You can't really zoom in to tune the fine details because like you're already zoomed in. You're looking at the details. So you gotta make every pixel count, and it's a real challenge. So what I came up with was, well, you can just see for yourself. I know. This thing was not an octopus. It was barely organic. I would say it was closer to a mech or a metal claw. It didn't help that it had 3 legs. Like, what was I thinking? Like, it's an octopus, though. Literally, the point of an octopus is it has 8 legs. Anyways, needless to say, I wasn't really satisfied with this one, so back to YouTube tutorial hell I went. In my second educational escapade, I learned a bit more about line work. Lines are actually sort of tricky because it's really easy to produce something that looks jagged and unnatural if you're not careful about your pixel placement. In fact, there's sort of a mathematical rule when it comes to smooth curves that involve counting pixels on either side of a given curve's like peak or inflection point, or I don't know, I don't really remember geometry, but basically the pixels on one side of the line should match the position and cadence of pixels on the other side of the line, if that makes any sense. Otherwise, you get these guys, which I learned in the pixel art community are referred to as jaggies. So I tried this in my second design, and I think it helped a little bit. This one definitely felt a bit more like a creature. It kind of looked like an octopus. I was pretty happy with it. But, you know, I wasn't really convinced of its design. Like, yes, it had likeness to an octopus, but it didn't really feel alive. So, yep, back to YouTube. This time I learned a lot more about shading and color theory. As far as shading goes, a lot of YouTubers drove home the idea to really consider where exactly your light source is. Is it coming from the top, from the side? And how would that light interact with your design if it took up actual 3-dimensional space? Now, for color theory, the biggest takeaway was actually, for a beginner, just don't pick colors at all. A lot of people recommend just taking a palette from Low Spec, a website for, well, sharing pixel art color palettes, and just using that. So that's what I did. I found one that spoke to me, I imported it, and I really swung for the fences on this one, I think. Lo and behold, my new logo. I have to say, I was really happy with how this turned out. I think the shading was more realistic, and I actually sort of liked ditching the outline in this iteration. It kind of felt less cartoonish in this way, so I don't know. What I do know is I really enjoyed this project. I think learning anything new, especially in the creative realm, is always so much fun and really fulfilling, to me at least. And yeah, art is subjective, obviously, so I actually am really curious, which of the 3 designs did you guys prefer? Maybe it's not number 3, maybe it's number 2, or maybe that weird metal claw thing spoke to you, so it could be number 1. Anyway, so thank you to the 10 subscribers I have for watching, and everyone else who's not subscribed from watching. I really do appreciate everyone, especially the subscribers. Just 10 of you, but you guys mean a lot to me. So here's the next 10, and I hope to see you guys really soon.